Welcome back, everyone, to a new episode of Sisto Says, powered by Design 2147, a New York City building and code consulting firm here in New York City. Today, I have the privilege to have Rob Costomiris of MIYOM here with me today. Welcome aboard, Rob.
Privilege, I like that.
Makes
me feel special.
It is a privilege. Our show always starts about people connecting, communicating. So Rob and I met probably about a year ago through our production company, Why Not You Media, and Tony Peck and Fran and Michael and Nate. And we started chatting, and he asked me what I do, and I told you what we do and what design does. And here we are. You're in the real estate world with an incredible concept. And thank you for taking the time to come down and speak with us about it. But that's how we met. And it's amazing that the world we're in of construction, real estate, you always find someone that has something different than the next person. And you and I have gone to dinner many times, and we've talked about, you know, your concept and what you do for your firm. And I thought it would be very interesting to bring this concept that's not really here in New York City, but it may be, because I think as the market's changing, you could share with the audience about the concept of investing in real estate and giving people the opportunity to rent and then eventually buy. But it's quite different than what I've heard in the past. So tell us a little bit about it. And,
just to touch on what you said, we were in New York, New Jersey. I'm going to say the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey. Connecticut's a little more open than New York and New Jersey, but currently we're not, solely because the margins are so thin. If a price of a home is not too high, then the price of the construction to do it, I mean, you're in construction, you know. And then if it's not that, then it's the price to, you know, get somebody into the home. And what I mean by that is like how long it is or what we have to pay the realtors and things of that nature. So the margins
the overhead is too much.
Yeah, the margins are so thin. However, I do think in the next 6 months, year, 2 years, I'm not making a prediction on timing, but I do think with everything that went on with COVID, and I do think there's going to be unfortunately, some foreclosures. With interest rates rising, I think there might be some people who can't.
Yeah, what you're saying is there's the opportunity for some more.
I think in this area there'll be a lot more opportunity than there will be across the country, because what we do is we buy distressed homes, and I don't mean distressed looking wise, I mean financially wise, meaning somebody couldn't get into it.
So, one would, someone who's going to watch this podcast in the next couple of weeks is going to say, so what's the difference between that and a flip? And there's a huge difference. So tell the audience about that. The concept here is not really flipping it. It's giving more. In my opinion, when I heard about it, it's about giving more opportunity to people to actually buy a home before they can just go and say, oh, well, it's a flip. I did it. I fixed it. I put it on the market, and I'm going to make a profit. This concept of yours is quite different.
Well, it is. So it is flipping, but you're right. It is totally different because our exit strategy is a little bit different.
Exactly.
Where we use local contractors wherever we go. We're across the country. We use local contractors. But we also list it with a local realtor. But at the same time, and the realtor knows about this, and a lot of realtors will watch it, and they'll say, oh, well, that's not right to do. But the realtor knows, and they could even bring us people. If there's a family or individual that doesn't have bank-ready credit score, I say is like 680 and below, they have been working in the same place consistently for 3 years, they're a W-2 employee, we'll get them into the home. We'll refer them out to a credit specialist. They'll fix their credit, and then we'll also refer them out to an FHA lender. Once their credit is to a certain point, we'll take a portion of their rent and apply it as their down payment, and that'll get them their first-time mortgage.
Right. So that to me is an incredible concept, because you're going to take a risk. Your investors take a risk, but you've opened the ability for others who would never get that opportunity because they don't have the down payment or they don't have the right credit score. But now, through this concept that you have, you're giving this ability to these other people.
Yeah, and this all came about when the founder, my partner, Mark Cox, started buying row homes in Baltimore and fixing them up. And he'd buy them for like 10, 20,000 back in the early 90s. He'd fix them up, and then, he'd sell them all for 80 to 100 to 150, 200,000, making huge margins. But then he's, stepping back and he's looking at the people that are going in. It's not people from the neighborhood, it's other people. I'm not saying he's gentrifying it, but in essence, he's gentrifying it. And that's where the rent-to-own program came from.
And, it's amazing. No matter... we're on like our 30, I guess you're the 31st or 32nd episode, Rob. And it's like a whirlwind to me that if you told me last March with Fran that he interviewed me, that we would be at 31 episodes, but here we are. And what do we talk about? It doesn't matter where we are. And this is not scripted. We're just talking, right? And that's what you and I do, right?
Yeah.
You could talk as much as me, so that makes it great. Is you're talking about, Baltimore. 2 episodes ago, Nicole Campo came in, and she was working with a community board here in Brooklyn. And part of her job was to hear the community. And one of the problems in that particular community was the people there couldn't afford the homes anymore. And people had to leave. And her point to the community was, we have to find a way that people are not forced out, that they're not being, pushed by developers to keep forcing the older generation to sell. Now's the time, and actually harassing them out of the neighborhood. Last week, I went to a ribbon cutting here in Flatbush. And they're building a 324-unit building, affordable housing for people that were incarcerated, people that were homeless. Incredible program. Not only for housing, but with support. But the story from the local politicians that came to speak about the building were that they lived in this neighborhood. In Flatbush, a 2-family house right now is $2 million.
Jesus.
There's nobody who's lived there their whole life that can buy this house.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a bad way. There's most people that live anywhere can't afford to. We're talking about a program that not a program, because I would say that your strategy and your business strategy is to find these homes, to find the right sweet spot, to get the right investors, to get the right contractors, and be able to take that, market it a certain way that it's not a straight flip, but it has the opportunity for people to rent and then buy. I mean, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's brilliant, and because it allows those people that are in that neighborhood or grew up in that neighborhood to stay there, whether it's in Baltimore or it's in Brooklyn. Hopefully in the future you can do these things, but even in the other boroughs. So, there's a similar pattern, not only in New York City, it's out there too.
Well, we see it immensely here in New York City about how the neighborhoods, the city, whatever you want to call it, like look at the South Bronx now. I mean, when I was growing up, you couldn't even go to the South Bronx.
Well, we've done a few buildings on the South Bronx.
Yeah.
And
now
again,
there's the piano district that's there.
Listen, Westchester, you and I you live in it, I go through it. There's a train station in New Rochelle. There's high-rise buildings. There's a train station. There's 6-story buildings in Mount Vernon. There's a train station in Yonkers. There's little cities popping up. The mass transit that's allowed people to hybrid, to go into the city twice a week instead of 5, like me. I used to come in, 5 days a week from Connecticut to Williamsburg. I used to spend 2 hours a day in a car. The next generation doesn't want to do that, but the workplace has changed that. The workplace has changed that. So as you look for these deals, are there like specific locations where, how do you find deals around the country? I mean, it's hard enough to find deals when you're in one market.
The inventory now is slim to none, but we have a proprietary technology. And when I say proprietary, everyone thinks it's like some elaborate thing.
Well, sounds impressive.
Yeah, it's literally a computer that sits on our desk, and we have raw data that comes in from, it's not the multiple state MLS, but it's a program that is
and it tells you
comparable.
tells you what's available.
Just like if you're on Zillow or
Right.
what is it, Redfin or any of those, and you're clicking when you're looking for a house, 2-family, 1-family,
Right, it
detached.
filters it out.
We're basically doing the same thing. It's 750 down, no row homes. I forgot. There's a 2-bedroom
Like you
minimum.
have your own criteria.
Right. I think
That's
it's
part
10,
of your business model.
Yep. And as soon as these properties come up, one of the biggest components that we have is that it's a 60% discount to what the alleged market value is.
Right. So you set the precedence and you set the model that you're looking for, and then the computer, using the technology, able to filter out what fits your model.
It actually sends out offer letters to whoever's on the listing, whether it's for sale by owner, the realtor, whatever it is.
Automatically.
Like 5 or 10% below whatever they're asking, it'll send it out. And then we have analysts who, if you look on their desktop, I thought it was a website, but it's our technology site, and it shows it just like a Redfin or Zillow would.
That's very impressive.
Yeah. And I actually thought it was, I was like, no, that's not it. Mark's like, what are you talking about? That's, I was like, oh, really? I was like, that's actually very professional looking.
That's great.
And you literally click on it and it gives you the full listing and everything like that. It shows what the offer is. And these guys' job is to actually make sure that the property is a real property. It's not just land. It's not dilapidated. It fits our criteria.
Right.
And that the comps are recent comps, because a lot of areas don't have recent sales. Right. So as long as it fits all that, they'll call the agent up and they'll say, hey, we sent you an offer. It's probably in your junk box. Take a look at it. See if it's something you want. And then that's where the conversation starts. So yeah, the technology is one of the main areas.
It's not someone sitting around hitting a button trying to go around and trying to find something. So,
no, we also have
it's
analysts.
but I'm saying it seems very sophisticated to get through the first layer.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking to myself, look, just helping my son's moving back from Arizona, just trying to find a house in Trumbull, Connecticut.
Especially nowadays.
Yeah, and my future son-in-law's in the business. There's like no inventory.
None.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
And the price point was, it's stable. But, the other day I found something very interesting. I was flipping through Instagram, looking for something from Fran, actually, that I was going to look at. And there was a gentleman on real estate talking about it. And he says, there's all these real estate people talking about high interest rates. And his position was high interest rates mean stabilized pricing. Low interest rates mean higher prices for the real estate because people feel they can afford more because they're paying less. And his position was that's not necessarily true.
I don't agree with
if
that.
you really like the house and you could afford to pay the 7% now,
Right.
and in 3 to 5 years, the banks know what they're doing. They're going to readjust. You're going to pay them a fee, and you're going to remortgage, and you'll be back where you came from. So I think that the way the media portrays it gets a little scary.
That's what I was just gonna say. I was gonna say, let's touch on that for a second, because I come from Wall Street, and I know that perception is such a huge thing. And if you look at where interest rates were 2 years ago, extremely high. But if you look at where interest rates are for a 30-year average, we're literally like right at the average, maybe a little bit higher. So we're not too crazy. And once the media, and I hate to say it because I'm not a fan of the media, but like if they would just shut up about how high interest rates were, I think there would be a lot more people selling, which would bring more buyers to the market, and prices would go up.
Well, so, and today the way things, information gets sent out,
it's
at the speed of light.
Everything's got to be first.
Well, you just put a perfect example. Your company has cutting edge technology that they could look at any site, anywhere, any house in the United States that fits this criteria, comes in, someone looks at it and says, yes, we can make an offer, hits a button, and it goes out. I mean, you didn't say anything about, well, we put a guy, or a woman in a plane, and we sent her out to Kansas City, Missouri to go look at a one-family house because it fit our criteria. You did the whole thing online. I mean, to me, that speaks volumes about what's going on today in the real estate world. Here in New York City, one of the things that the show's been touching on a lot is empty offices that are going to be converted to residential. And the biggest issue with it is the laws, because some of them are antiquated, and they were written for different types of. The state and the city have to agree on something. Takes time. We got millions of square feet of office buildings that there's nobody in. The
Unused.
neighborhoods are empty. The garment district is getting rezoned. That's going to take time, but there's nobody in the buildings. They got these big floors, and there's one section of the floor holding on,
yeah.
and it's just a matter of time before they can't afford it, or their businesses change.
Look at all the huge developers that are, defaulting, just walking away from buildings because they probably, everyone sees it and they're like, oh, well, they're defaulting. They probably made their money on the building and they're like, it's not worth it for us to keep it anymore.
There's buildings, and one of the big trends here that's different that we talked about before, Rob, and you hit on it before, and I don't know how this affects your world, but here in New York City, many years ago, you would take a loan on a building, and let's say things went really bad. The bank would say, okay, this asset's worth more than what you owe us. We'll take the asset. Mm-hmm. And banks were in the real estate business. Mm-hmm. There are big rumblings through New York City. I don't know about Westchester and Long Island or New Jersey or Connecticut, but in the 5 boroughs and the seminars that I go to, there is not going to be foreclosures. Banks have personal guarantees. They're saying, we don't want your asset. Mm-hmm. We don't want your asset.
They don't want to deal with it anymore.
We don't want it. You sell it, and you still owe us the difference. Mm-hmm. That is a big difference because now it is harder for you to walk away from that deal. And there are a lot of notes in New York City that people took when the notes went all the way down that need to be refinanced in the upcoming years.
Balloon payments.
And the asset isn't worth what they took on them. Mm-hmm. That is a big topic of conversation when I'm at the seminars. I try to go to 2 or 3 a month that are related to, a lot of them are always related to the construction field or the architecture and engineering, the development field, but there's always the banking side. You can't have construction anywhere without banking.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's the beauty of real estate is that the leverage that you could have just to get into an asset is so much greater than anything else you do. You can't buy a stock the same way. You can't invest in mutual funds. You can't do any of that the way you can do real estate.
Correct. And I love this part of the show is because we get to talk about the things we talk about before we get on the show. Mm-hmm. And before we got on the show, we talked about, people leaving their country and coming here, right? And my dad was a perfect example of it. He came from Italy, came here. My father was a truck driver. He drove a garbage truck, and
here in the States?
Here in the States. And he bought real estate in Queens, upstate, New York, Astoria. Astoria was his main place. Mm-hmm. And he bought millions of dollars worth of real estate. He drove a garbage truck. And I would always ask him, Dad, but my friends' fathers, they got stocks. They own Mobil. They own Exxon. He'd say, Ma Sisto, I got to tell you something. If you no feel it and you no walk on it, it's not for me. And at 91 years old, when he passed away, he acquired 5 or 6 pieces of real estate. He never cashed them in. He paid them off. And that was his legacy. He did not believe in giving, money to a bank and them giving them 4%. He always felt that if I owned it, nobody could take this from me. Nope. And that is one thing that I feel that my father was different than his brothers. They got Americanized very quickly, and he was more old school, but he felt that that's what he could latch onto. Mm-hmm. That made him who he was in America, that he could say to you or to me or anyone else, I own that, mm-hmm. I own that, I own that. And he was proud of that. And I think that today, you're right. It is the easiest thing to get into where you can leverage your wealth into something else.
Yeah, it was. I think it was at the beginning of this year. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I'd always, since I've been on Wall Street, I've always done well, made some decent money and everything, and created a nice life for myself, my family, and everything. But then I woke up, and it was right around January 1st. I don't think it was actually January 1st, but I had a new envisionment, and I've always been, like, all right, I have to, make this much a year. I want to put this much aside and do this. But then I was like, no, I don't want.
Because that's how your brain always thought.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't want that anymore. I want generational wealth. I want to create something for my kids, kids, their kids. I want to create something where they don't have to. My wife and I, I'm not saying we struggled, but there was times where we were like, what are we gonna do? In the credit crunch of 2006, 2007.
Yeah.
When there was a couple months where I didn't take home a check. So,
Right.
I don't want my kids to have to worry about that. Okay, I'm not taking home a check. Fine. We'll just work harder and we'll just make sure that our future's better.
And again, listen, financial freedom is always a wonderful thing.
Such a wonderful
It creates for me, I think it just creates creativity of the mind. It
Yeah.
allows you to go to other places that you're not hesitant to do.
Yeah, you can take more risk.
So what was your background? What did you do on Wall Street?
I started off on a regular boiler room. It wasn't a boiler room, but it was like that. Everyone's up, standing up, smiling, dialing, pitching. Stockbroker. Went and transitioned kind of into a financial advisor where I was taking entire
wealth
portfolios. Yeah. And then we started a broker dealer in 2011. Myself and 3 other individuals.
Oh, nice.
I started the insurance division. We started an RIA. We were upwards of 150 advisors, brokers, whatever you want to call them, in 3 or 4 different states.
Very impressive.
Yeah. And
So how did you get out of that and into this real estate?
So
MIYOM.
it was 2016. My business partner, who we had a book of business with, where we managed clients and clients' assets. And he moved down to Orlando, and he got out of the business.
Completely.
Yeah, and I was running the broker dealer, and now I had to manage my clients as well. And it was, too much. I then transitioned into executive C-suite, whatever they call it. I was managing the broker dealer where I was on a salary bonus structure, first time in, at that time, 16 years. And I liked it. It was a little bit different, but I liked it. Gave me a little more consistency. But then for the next, 4 or 5 years, I got a little bored managing advisors. It's like trying to wrangle cats. And I had sent out a text to 20 different people saying, hey, listen, my contract's up December 31st. I think I want to make a change. Not sure what it is. If you know anybody, I'll be happy to take introductions. And before I put my phone down, and I don't know if you're like me or not, but when I send a text out to somebody, I'm just expecting a text back. My phone rings, and Mark, my now business partner, he's calling me. I look at my phone. I'm like, oh, come on, what are we doing here? Just text you. Just text me back. So I picked up. I was like, hey, what's up? He's like, I want you. I'm like, what do you mean you want me? And he's like, I want you. I want you to come work with me. And I was like, you can't afford me. Plus, I don't think you have anything going on. He goes, let's have lunch. Let me tell you what I'm working on. Then you could tell me that I can't afford you. And I was like,
you're already smarter than him.
you know what? I was like, all right, let's do it. And so, through a series of meetings, he gave me everything that he was doing and everything. And I was like, listen, I'm in, but I don't know real estate. And he's like, I don't know capital raising. He's like, I've gone to people, they've helped me out, they've given me money.
So that's actually your side of the business, is finding investors to believe in this program.
Yeah.
Show them that it's profitable. Show them that you can give them the return that they can get.
Yeah.
And he understood the real estate side. You understood the capital side.
Yeah, and
sounds like a marriage made in heaven.
Yeah, well, and it is. And I knew, like, I had 2 properties I flipped. I've owned investment properties. I've known, I by no means do I know like the extent of what you do or what he does, and but I'm learning how to structure deals, and I've done it on Wall Street, put deals together, and so it's very, very similar.
Right.
It's just I'm trying to hone it.
I'm sure that the business principles of it are very similar.
There's not much difference.
It's not much different. Look, someone's going to give you X, you're going to get back Y.
You just have to figure out how the return is coming in, and then how you give it back to the
give it back.
Yeah,
exactly.
There's not much difference. And
well, that makes a lot of sense that you're able to having that background and then finding your way into that. They kind of go hand in hand. It's not much different. So you knew the sales side of it because you were selling. You were cold
slinging
calling
stocks like there's no one's business.
Exactly.
It's funny because I had a client when I was young, and I was making more money than I knew what to do with at the time. And I had a client. And he's like, kid. He goes, why don't you come work for me? He goes, I do real estate, and I promise you, I can make you a lot of money. I'm like, what do I want to get in real estate for? That's for old people. And he's like, kid, you don't even know what you're talking about. He's like, you're doing a great job, but I'll make you a richer person than you know what to do with if you come work with me. And I didn't listen to him, but now I know exactly what he
You
was
know,
talking about.
it's funny that you say that. Recently, I bought a small piece of property in Stamford, Connecticut, with my children, and I before my father passed away, I wanted him to see that I took his principles of real estate and I made them all go there and I made them all touch it and feel it and walk on it and work there. And the investment has gone up almost 23% in 2 years.
Yeah.
It was the right deal in the right place. We put some sweat equity into it, and it's it's an income producing property in a great neighborhood. We've been looking to buy one, and we can't find another one since because the market is
so tight.
Even though the interest rates have gone up, the problem is that people are afraid to sell.
Yeah.
And they could get more. The property value is more, but unless they're relocating, Rob, right now, people are not selling in Stamford to stay in Stamford down the street.
Yeah.
They're selling out of a neighborhood to move to South Carolina, North Carolina, to Florida. So yeah, but that's, we hear about it in the media, but not everybody's packing their stuff and moving to Florida. People want to stay in Westchester. People want to stay in Connecticut. People want to stay in the Bronx. People want to stay everywhere. Not everybody wants to pack up and leave, but it's funny how that tradition of real estate, when you see it worked for your dad and it worked for me, and now I pass that along, I'm sure you're going to pass that on to your children. And believe it or not, whether you like it or not, they're going to be in the real estate business at some point because they don't have a choice. That's what they've learned. That's what they feel comfortable with. That's what you've made them feel comfortable with. So on this show, I have, he always gets quoted. He probably is going to owe me a lot of money. My good friend, Andrew Peters, he is a chief estimator for Curry & Brown. What he does for a living is when people come to him and say, we want to put a new addition on this school, the first thing that most real estate people and the college ask them is, well, how much is it going to cost? And his job is to take a concept, sometimes without drawings, and give them an idea that this will cost you $10 million so that the college can go back and fundraise the $10 million. Tough job. He doesn't have drawings. He doesn't have plans. He doesn't know. But his job is to forecast when they're ready to break ground and when they're ready to do it. Insurance went up by this. Materials went up by this. And I always say he's got the greatest job in the world because most people never expect him to be right, but he's got to guess, right? And he has a saying, he never looks in the rearview mirror. His job is always to look forward. And too many people live in the past, especially in the construction world, in the real estate world, in my world of architecture and engineering and codes, and how much did it cost when you did this, and no, you don't have your plans ready. It's a year from now. How do I estimate it? We got to look forward, and that's all. And I believe in it. So all the guests get to give us one forecast, and the best part about it is that through that forecast, I get to ask you back here in 8 or 9 months because you made some really great points today about the business you're in, the opportunities that are there. Yet you're saying New York is not there yet, and
For us.
right.
Yeah.
But the good news is I'm going to ask you, what's your prediction for next year? And then hopefully we get you back on the show in 6 or 7 months. We get to run the show back. And we said, well, Rob said this, and we get two things. One, we could say you're a genius and you were right. And the second one is, hey, Rob, you missed the expectation, and that's okay too. So going forward, knowing that you're not in the New York tri-state market, knowing that interest rates sound like they're going to start to fall. Sound like they're going to start to fall.
That was going to be my prediction.
Right? So they're going to start to fall. But at the same time, do we really have a grapple on inflation? Are people going to be, in tough spots because the things around us cost more, and now they have these homes that they can't afford? And unfortunately, that does create an opportunity. Even though it's distressed financially, there will be opportunities. It's never not happened in this country. So what do you think your market will be in 2024?
I think that I read an article recently. I think everybody's read it. It was an ING analyst that came out and said that for 2024, they're going to lower rates 6 times over starting in the second quarter, which I think is extremely aggressive.
Yeah.
To I think it's 150 basis points, 1.5% over the next.
So we'll
what
get
is it?
back down to 4.5.
I had spoken to a friend of mine who's an analyst at a huge bank that we all know, and he agreed with the lowering of the interest rates. He doesn't agree with 6 times, but he does say it's going to be between a point and a quarter.
It's a lot.
We're going into an election year. All these politicians doesn't matter what side you're on, don't want to be talking about inflation, or they want to be talking about it, whichever way, but they want to kind of mute that as much as possible.
They don't want that to be in the forefront.
I firmly see, if you asked me that 2 weeks ago, I would have said, no, there's no way they're going to lower interest rates. They'll destroy the economy. Now I lost sight that it was an election year, so I firmly believe that now that something I've learned growing up is that you can't keep your feet planted in the sand and just keep going with it.
Oh, no way.
You kind of have to look at all sides of every situation, and I left out that it was an election year.
I didn't ask you what's going to happen after the election.
Yeah, well,
because then again, you can't and even the greatest forecasters can't forecast that. But
I do think they're going to lower it. I think what that's going to do is going to allow a lot of people to start selling. You got a lot of these baby boomers who are in homes and like, well, we don't have a mortgage or we have a low mortgage rate.
Right.
Why would we sell now just to get into a condo or move down to Florida and have a higher interest rate?
There's no question that I'm 58. A lot of my friends haven't downsized yet, but we're all getting ready, right? And we're getting ready too, my wife and I. And I'm not worried about the interest rate because to me, I've learned from my father. He bought buildings at 16% in the 80s. When the interest rates came down, he refinanced them. And he made money.
Yeah.
Because he knew that the value of the real estate would outgrow putting it in the bank.
There's a quote from a real estate agent that I follow. And he said, waiting for interest rates to come back down in the 80s, if you were in the 80s and you waited, if you were 18%, whatever it was, if you waited for them to come down, by the time they started to come down in the early to mid 90s, the price of whatever asset that you would have bought would have grown much more than the amount that you were waiting for it to come down.
I remember my dad buying homes in the 80s when I was in high school, and he drove me to Brooklyn Tech. And I went to Brooklyn Tech. I lived in Astoria. It was an hour and 15-minute commute by train. Once in a while, my dad would drive me. And we would drive, and all around the school were burnt-out buildings. And they were beautiful brownstones, all burnt out, boarded up. Terrible. My father used to say, we got to buy these buildings. And I would say to my father, what are you, crazy? And now they're $5-6 million each. You can't even go near them. So you're right. Back then, if you had something that you paid $40,000, 9 years later, when the interest rate came down, that asset was worth $150,000. And my father never sold.
Yeah.
My father never sold. He kept them. So you're forecasting that the next year,
interest rates pull back, people start selling, and with what inflation has done,
inventory will come up too.
Yeah, but I also think with what inflation has been doing over the past whatever years, that because that's gone up so much, it's going to drive the prices of the homes and even commercial properties as well up as well. I don't think it's going to go through the roof, but I just think it'll consistently go up.
Well, Rob, this was great. Incredibly educational, informative. The show's really a lot about New York City, but this is really a lot about the concept of real estate. So I really appreciate you coming down to talk to me, and look forward to having you back. I want to make sure that these predictions. Listen, if my mortgage rates goes up, I'm gonna have to have you. You're not coming back.
I appreciate you having me, Sisto. Thank you very much.
Rob.